24 tonight. This was a question we looked at, began to look at last week, and we're just going to move on a little bit more. I stopped there at the quote. I didn't want to rush the quote last week. So this is a quote from somebody talking about why the impact of Ananias and Sapphira when they were killed. These are two people who were killed because they had some land, and then they lied about how much the money was and gave away what they wanted a bit of praise. Why was God so dramatic by killing them in this situation, this time? And this guy quotes, makes this comment about this type of thing. He says the propriety of it, or the situation of it, may be appreciated. We suppose Ananias to have succeeded in his undertaking. He writes fancy, this is an old boy. Okay, his success would have been but temporary, for the fraud, like all other frauds, would have been detected sooner or later. When the detection came, it would have been brought with serious discount. That's definitely old English word, isn't it? In the minds of the people, the powers of the Holy Spirit dwelling in the apostles. Now, what he's beginning to say there, and he's going to say in the next slide, is that Ananias wouldn't have got away with it forever. People would have understood eventually that he practiced fraud. His hypocrisy would have come to light. And basically he says, then people would ask questions, well, goodness, how was he able to deceive the apostles? How was he able to deceive God? And what kind of impact this had to have in the church in the first century? That's basically what he said, but fancy words, okay? So the second half of the quote says, to learn that the Spirit could be deceived would have undermined the whole fabric of apostolic authority, and might have overthrown the faith of many, if not all. The attempt brought on a crisis of vital importance and demanded such a vindication of the power of the Spirit as could be neither mistaken nor forgiven. Okay? So he's saying that really God had to do something in this case. Because if he hadn't done it here, then it would have undermined, well, God doesn't know everything. No, I can get away with all sorts. It's all right to lie, it's all right to cheat, it's all right to do all these different things because, we can deceive God. But this instance here shows that God can't be deceived, and that's why it was such an important and such a big impact. Michael Jerry Jones says, this story reminds us that the church has always had problem members. Ananias and Sapphira were charter, that means they were members of the church in the first century, the beginning members when the church was beginning, and therefore the impact upon them was that much more. To this point, it seems that all had been positive with the early church. Perhaps they might have felt that if they could kill God's Son and get away with it, then they could do anything. And that hypocrisy would be a part of the church, just as it had been like in Phariseeism, okay? Why should we be that different from everybody else? And obviously God's dealing with Ananias and Sapphira, saying Christians ought to be different. Because we know that God's watching, and therefore we ought to do things different in our lives. Key issues, the point is not that they kept part of the money because it was their money anyway. The point was that that's why verse 4 says, didn't it belong to you? Peter says, didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't it still your money at your disposal? So it was not that Peter sentenced them, but what about God actually killing people? God stepping into humanity and wiping somebody out. Wow. I'm glad he doesn't do the same today, quite in the same way. But God doesn't. It's an interesting thing with funerals and stuff like that, often people say when somebody dies, well, God took them. Okay? And I, for some reason, for many, many years, I have always disagreed with that statement. Because I don't think God did take them. Okay? Sin is the devil's domain. Death is a result of sin in some people's lives. But it's also a knock-on effect of ever since sin came into the world. There's a lot of impacts, side impacts of what sin has done. For example, if somebody has, some of the simpler things, if somebody, a parent has a child and she doesn't have a lot of calcium in her body, when the child walking around when he's 30 and 40 and he's walking around with bandy legs, it's quite often the direct result of the fact that the mother didn't have enough calcium in her body. So there's lots of things that happen in this world that's an impact on our physical bodies today. And the first, when in Adam and Eve's time, when God made everything, it was all perfect. So we didn't have a degradation, or if that's the right word, didn't have a degrading of things in that first few centuries that we have in our centuries when we get so many different things impact upon the human body, and we're getting all this, we're eating all this junk food and stuff like that, and it's all having an impact. We don't even know some of the impact it's going to have, but it affects our kids. You see a lot of kids now hyperactive. Why? Because of all the E numbers they're having, all the chemicals we're putting into their bodies. So there's a lot of things we're doing, not deliberately, but something just because of the lifestyle we live, that we don't know the ultimate impact that's going to have on our children of the next generation. And so God doesn't always step in to wipe people out. It's an unusual event when God steps in to take a life like this. It doesn't mean to say He hasn't taken life in time past, because He has. All through the Old Testament you see instances where He does. But death is usually a last resort, and death is something that God doesn't get too much involved in as for taking somebody's life, because as I say, that's in the sin side. Satan's biggest weapons, two major weapons: fear and death. Okay, so when we lose somebody, or when we talk about losing somebody, it's careless, but we don't lose somebody. When somebody dies, then it's an important thing, which means it's an end product, which reminds us of the frailty of life. But the writer, God says, I don't want anybody to perish. I don't want anybody to die, and to come to that knowledge of the gospel of Jesus Christ, a knowledge of salvation. Okay, so when you see a real bad person running around and he gets shot, God didn't take him, but because God would have rather he stayed alive long enough to hear the gospel. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of stuff in there you've got to think about. And sometimes it brings us comfort, and sometimes it doesn't. But ultimately, God doesn't want anybody to perish, but all to come to repentance. Okay, so it's an interesting concept, and might sometime we talk a little bit more about that. So they were members of the body. They were true believers. These were the first Christians, were the first Christian group. Shortening someone's physical life is not the worst thing that can happen to them. We often think, goodness, what happens if I die? What happens if I get killed? But Jesus said, don't worry about those who can kill the body, he says. Worry about those who can kill the soul. Because we've only got our body as a temporary thing for 75 or 86 years plus in some cases. We some of us, but in the light of eternity, that's nothing. It really is nothing. So the important thing is for us to get ourselves right for eternity, because that's where we're going to spend eternity is more important at the end of the day than surviving in this life. So Ananias felt no pain in this story. Okay. Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. Luke 12 says. Yeast is something that, using bread, and you can hardly see it, but it's a tremendous impact. You see, you put a bit of heat in it, and all of a sudden you see the bread go, and that's the active work. And you don't even put heat in it, do you? It used to be, what is that stuff? It used to be called it was a friendship cake or something. You just take a bit of yeast and you pass it on to somebody, and they bung it in a pan, and the thing just fills up the pan. And you can, as a matter of fact, if you hold on to it long enough, you get yeast coming out everywhere. You want to give it away to people. It's not a friendship cake, but here, give your enemies one of these, and it's under control. But yeast is very powerful stuff. You can hardly see it, and yet it has an invasive action, a pervasive action. And he says that the hypocrisy of the Pharisees was like that invasive yeast, and had such an impact on the life and times of Jesus, that people would look at the Pharisees and think, bunch of hypocrites. Jesus was really scared. You whitewashed wall, like dead men's bones. On the outside you look good, but inside you're really bad guys, Not all of them, thankfully, but some of them. And so we can put on a good front, but inside, sometimes some of the things we have lasting impact on other people's lives, not for their good, but for their bad. And so it's an invasive thing. So whenever you do something, it's like when you tell a lie. They always say when you tell a lie, you've got to have a good memory. Because it'll keep coming back at different times, different ways. And if you can't remember the first thing, how you answered last time, you're in trouble, because you'll get caught out in it. So it's one of those invasive things. Okay. Matthew 23 verse 5 says, They do all the deeds to be noticed by men. These were religious leaders of the day. They love to go to the street corners and do an audible prayer in front of the whole crowd. Stop the traffic. You can imagine all the donkeys going on. Hold on, he's praying, you know. I'm such a good person. Remember the prayer one guy says, I'm glad I'm not like this sinner. You know. We can pray as that. Anyway, they love the place of honour at banquets. There you are, all the best places. We woe to you sinners and scribes and hypocrites. You clean the outside of the cup and of the dish. They're really good at making sure everything's nice and clean on the outside. But he says inside, you're full of robbery and indulgence, self-indulgence. Terrible thing, terrible indictment on supposedly the spiritual leaders of the people. And so hypocrisy has a real insidious background to it. Of what were they guilty? Hypocrisy. Hypocrisy is, it's a type of dishonesty, claiming to be more holy or spiritual than they really are. It's corrosive and contagious. It destroys authenticity and is devastating to God's message to the world. People will read us before they read the book. They'll read us before they read the Bible. And if they see bits and pieces in our life that they reject because they see hypocrisy, then they're going to say, I don't want your God, I don't want your Christ, because I've seen you. If that's what it's like, I don't want it. And that's tragic, really. People will often reject Christianity not because of understanding who Christ is and what Christ done for them, but because they see a hypocrisy in the lives of Christians and say, if that's what it's like, I'm not interested. Tragic, really. Devastation to the rest of the world. Self-righteous hypocrisy is so dangerous at the formative stage, God couldn't afford to let it take root in the early church. So Ananias and Sapphira pretended to be super Christians, but by their actions they were shown to be the opposite. Okay, they were hypocritical. And so remember the background. What happens to a local body once the leaven of the Pharisees takes hold? It can destroy the church, and it could have destroyed the church in the first century. So God did this, and it's had a real impact. The power of the Spirit quenched because of the constant falsehood and arrogance. Spiritual growth becomes very difficult in an environment where you can't admit your problems. Okay, we need to be honest not only with ourselves, we need to be honest with other people. What happens to the body? It says interpersonal closeness becomes very improbable. If you can't trust somebody, you're not going to share with them. If you can't have confidence in somebody, then you just won't work with them. I don't want to work with that guy. Boy, he'll just stab you in the back as soon as look at you. You know. And so cooperation is born out of humility. Instead of cooperation, born out of humility becomes competition. I'm a bigger Christian. I'm a better Christian than you are. I do more good. I do more this. I do more that. We try and build ourselves up, and the other time it wastes. So outreach dies. Focus goes to external behaviour. We're more interested in what a person looks like, how his hair's combed, than we are with his internal deportment with Christ. Because of fakiness, this is when young people, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And young people quite often have an ability to see through us a lot quicker than other people. Okay, so when they come to church and they sometimes see us saying things, but knowing we're doing some other things, they see through that and it just puts them right off. They don't want anything to do with Christ, because underlying despair then leaves people vulnerable to the phony quick fix solutions. So if we can't fix ourselves inside, then we'll look for other gimmicks it'll hide behind. Okay. Questions to ask yourself: have you ever felt bad that somebody else got more recognition than you? You know, I do more than him. How come he gets all the praise? You know. It was me that fixed that. Well, come he's walking away and everybody says, oh, what a good guy he is, and all that type of stuff. You know, are we annoyed sometimes when somebody is getting good things happening to them and being recognised, and we think we're working twice as hard and we're not getting anything. Nobody's seeing anything about, not patting us in the back, and the attitude sometimes. Have you ever held back to the full extent of personal sin in order to seem more spiritual than they really are? Okay? There's certain things we'll admit to some people, and there's some things we'll admit to nobody. But we'll like to perhaps sometimes want people to know or want people to think that we are better than we are. At the end of the day, God accepts us as we are. And He wants us to change and be better. But He starts off from that premise. He doesn't look at us and say, here's somebody perfect, therefore I can work with him. He sees most of us in a mess and says, I can work with them. And if God accepts us, then we need to learn to accept each other where we are. And then encourage each other to grow more like Christ, okay? So, if our spirituality is in question, then everything else is going to be in question. Have you ever been defensive when confronted with personal failure? You go right back in the garden, you know, and God says to Adam, you know, what have you done? Well, it was you, it's the wife you gave me. Well, what about the wife? It was a snake. Everybody else gets the blame. Nobody takes personal responsibility. And ultimately, you know, when we do things, it's good for our soul to admit, I messed up. I've done it wrong. And really, when you think about repentance, that's the keynote in repentance. You've got to say to God, God, I've messed it up again. I've got to admit to God that. Because if we say, no, it wasn't me, it must have been somebody else who did that, and therefore we're not going to ask God's forgiveness for the thing we've done, because we won't admit to ourselves what we've done wrong. You know, so there's an element there when we need to. Some people say it's only your best friend who'll tell you about your deodorant or lack of. Okay? How many people, you know, you go to somebody and they say, God, he's terrible, isn't he? Well, if you told him, I wouldn't tell him. You know, so the poor guy's walking down the street thinking he's doing all right, and everybody, talking behind the back. That's wrong, really, you know. But a good friend will say, hey, you know, I think you've stepped in something. You know, you get that checked out. And wow, when a person realizes he may have a problem, then hopefully he'll do something about it. But it takes a real good friend, because if anybody else says anything, you'll deck him. You know, because you don't want to admit sometimes to certain things. So sometimes it takes a real good friend to be able to tell us, to confront us with something, not in a way saying, you know, blah, blah, but in a kind and gentle way. You know, I think we may have a problem here, and can I help in any way and deal with it? But you've got to have trust. You've got to have confidence that you can approach somebody and be approachable. I used to know somebody that would never take a responsibility for his own. It was always somebody else's fault. And well, sometimes that's how I do. It's difficult to admit sometimes we're wrong. Frank admitted he was wrong once, then he realised he made a mistake. Anyway, the further away, don't tell him I said that. The further the more important praise becomes. Okay, so sometimes we look for praise, artificial praise, really. Failing to understand that God accepts us as we are, we look for other people to boost us, to give us false praise. You know, sometimes when you get to the top and being a politician, you surround yourself. You don't want people around you going to say, I thought that idea you put out the other day, it was rubbish. You want people to say, it's magic, that's good. And so one of the big problems that the top politicians have is all the people around them won't really tell them what the real problem is, because otherwise they might sack him. So they walk around them with, you know, and whatever he wants to hear, that's what we'll say. And that's tragic, really. I remember Maggie Thatcher in her end days. I was her biggest thing. Everybody, what do you want to hear, Maggie? Well, this is what, okay. You know, if that's what you want to hear. The same thing happened with most presidents get in the same situation. They surround themselves with yes men. And that's, you sometimes want to hear somebody strong enough to be able to say, no, you need to think about that again. But otherwise you end up in all sorts of trouble. All that. So further away we get from God, the more important praise becomes to other people. We surround ourselves with people that we think will give us a pat on the back, even though we don't deserve it. but we like that, so we don't want to hear the truth. You really get offended at the sins of other people and secretly know you're guilty of exactly the same thing. Paul, writing in Romans, this is one of the things he says about the Jews. He says, you look at these Gentiles, and you say, oh, these Gentiles are a bunch of thieves. He says, you Jews, you're doing the same things. And you should know better. You've got the Word of God. So it's easy sometimes for us to level accusations at other people. But always remember, when you point the finger at somebody else, there's another how many fingers are there? Another 3 fingers pointing back. Okay? Quite often that's the case. It's sadly the case that sometimes we see the weaknesses in other people quickly because we're very familiar with them in our own lives. That's why we can identify them easily. Now, if you've never seen an elephant before, and somebody said, "Oh, look," and they pointed at a lion and said, "Look, there's an elephant," and you've never seen an elephant before, you wouldn't be able to recognize. No, that's a lion. But if you were familiar with lions and somebody said, "Look, there's an elephant," you said, "You're stupid. I know what a lion looks like. I know what an elephant looks like." And sometimes when we look at other people, because we know a particular sin really well, we can spot it a mile away at other people. He's got it, But sometimes then we forget about the one, we're quite happy to point a finger at them. And we can justify why we do what we do, but he's got no justification for what he does, which is exactly the same what you're doing. It's a sad factor, really. We're a funny kind of people. We really want to give ourselves plenty of room, but we want to be really hard on other people in exactly the same situation. It's tragic, really. But of course, there's good signs as well. Some things that we need to aspire to. We need to be prepared to do good without seeking credit. Jesus says, "Don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing." If you want to help somebody, do them. Try and do it quietly and not go for the praise of men. That's short-lived. They go for the praise of God. So do good without seeking credit for it. Allow others to get credit. That's something that's really hard to do in it. If you've done something, it happens a lot in business. Your boss walks into the office. You spend about five weeks preparing this report sheet on where the company needs to go, and it's brilliant. And your boss comes in, "Oh, that looks pretty good." Says, "Give me a copy of that. I'd like to read that at home." He takes a copy. Next thing you know, there's a big business meeting next week. He's in the business meeting. He said, and this is the direction I think the company should go in the next couple of years. You think, that's my stuff. You can't say anything. He's the boss. He's stolen your stuff. Okay? That often happens in business. Other people are quite willing to take the credit for something that you've done. But how do you feel about that? Quite often you get really cheesed off. Where you say, "Well, as long as the job gets done, who cares who gets the credit?" That's a more Christ-like viewpoint. But because God knows. At the end of the day, irrespective of who else knows, God knows.
But you wouldn't trust that person again, would you?
But in some situations in work, it's just life. You can either then turn around, "Well, I'm not going to do anything ever again," or you just say, "Well, it's business," and don't allow that to nullify your creativity. It's a good one, isn't it? But that's what sometimes happens, Paul turns around and he says, "Don't get weary well doing." How often do you do something and people don't appreciate it? Okay? So what happens next time? You say, "Well, that's the last. I'm not going to do anything else for him or her," because it's just going to. Or Paul says, "Don't get weary in doing well doing. Just keep on going, whether they appreciate it or not. Just you be the best that you can be." And that's difficult. That's not the norm. That's a bit like Jesus saying, "Turn the other cheek," when you'd rather give them a bunch of fives. Okay? Don't get weary. That's a real tough challenge for Christians. Allow another to get credit for something you did. Admitting our sins to one another and praying for each other. James says. That's a difficult thing to do because, again, trust comes into it. And you don't want to share your inner secrets with a gossip. So you have confidence in the person. Whatever you share with somebody, that won't go any further. But you know that person will be down, and the only other person you can talk about you to is God. Okay, that's the there's a chorus in there.
I think with that one, Graham, as well, it's worth sort of saying that you're on about trusting someone, tell somebody something, you're trusting them. But there's also the angle of when you tell somebody something, if they go into a state of shock at what you told them, you've blown it again before you even start because of the reaction.
Well,
if the reaction is so bad and so over the top, that's you.
It can be devastating. So you've got to be careful that the person you're talking to is strong enough to be able to handle
to cope with it. Yeah.
That's there was another. It's not a good illustration, I'll leave right. Okay, but yeah, it's a difficult one. It's sometimes in our lives we find it very difficult to find somebody who can really get close to and can share our innermost secrets with confidence that they won't go any further. But people, sometimes the best we can do is say, look, I'm really struggling with this, whatever it is at the moment, and I want you to pray for me. Okay? You want people to be aware you have a problem, but you draw back from actually sharing what the problem is. But the very fact that you've had confidence to actually say to them, I've got a problem, I want you to, I'm struggling at the moment, can you pray for me? That takes a lot of guts as well, even though they don't know what it is. Because you can imagine them going around the corner like, I wonder what his problem is. Wow, we need to find it. And then asking someone, hey, Fred's got a problem. What, any idea what it is? And see who can do it faster. No, that's tragic. That would be wrong as well. But so you've got to have confidence in people, even though you're not telling the whole story. At the base of it is allowing yourself to be open. Love is a very, very difficult thing to really put into practice, because to love somebody, you've got to open yourself up to being hurt. No end of people who perhaps have gone into a relationship and been badly bitten in that relationship. They say, from then on, I'm going to get hard. I'm not going to allow that to happen to me again. And so they miss a lot of good stuff because they're not willing to open themselves up again. It's obviously common sense has got to be in there, and all this type of stuff, because we don't like being hurt. But sometimes the only way you can do something is to open yourself up in order to hopefully not be hurt, but by the very effect of opening yourself up, you open yourself up to being hurt. Okay, and you just hope that nobody will hurt you in that way. Okay, excuses for concealing our failures. Well, I don't want to make others stumble. If people really knew what I was like, they might think, oh goodness, well, what's the point? And they might give up. Okay? They wouldn't understand. They're so different from me. Isn't it amazing when we're doing a sin or we're involved in a sin? We've always got all these justifications for why we're caught up in it. Of course, you're so much stronger, or you're so much weaker, or whatever. You would never do what I'm doing. When in reality, if we were to have a competition of who's got the biggest sin, you quite often, if you were to list, quite often you see the same things done up in all lists. Because we all, at either some point or other, will be involved in the same kind of processes, whether it's gossip or whether it's impatience or whether it's anger or all these different things. None of us go as far as murder, but we might think about it occasionally with some people. Okay, but they're so different from me, but are we so different? We're all in the same boat really at the end of the day. Okay, and we all have different struggles, but we all struggle. That's a sin. So when I sinned, it was something that happened. It was really, at any other time it wouldn't have happened, but it was really special, and that's why I sinned. Of course, when you do exactly the same sin, you do it because you're a sinner. You do it because you get involved in that type of thing. But me, when I sinned, it was very special circumstances that caused me to sin. Rubbish. Okay. Well, I already admitted to something, so I'm not going to admit it to any more. So we have all these excuses why we don't open ourselves up to each other. We don't share the kind of people we are to each other. And it's justification all the way along. But sometimes, it's like in a lot of the big things, like the AA and people places like that. The people who know us best are the people who have been there. The people you want to go to for good advice are the people that have been through much the same kind of thing as you're going through. And they're the best kind of people to help you. They know what you're going through, and that's why it's good to be able to do it. So at the end of the day, the result is that fear came upon all the people. God killed 2 people. You know, what's going to happen to us? Next time we lie, next time we open our mouths, what's going to happen to us? Okay? Should we fear God? In contrast, do not be afraid of those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. There's no fear in love. Perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. You know, a child does something wrong, okay, and they come to their mother. They don't want to go to dad because they'll have 11 nails in. They come to their mother, okay, and the mother is the last person that really will shove them away, or should be the last person that will shove them away, because of the love connection, okay. When little Johnny's done something wrong and he runs back home, and you knock a door and say, little Johnny's been up to it again, and mother or father stand there and say, no, it wouldn't be my little Johnny, they would never do that. And you know, they give him a cuddle, alright? Little story. Anyway, the perfect love, it casts out fear. There's no fear in love, okay? And it's difficult. That's the kind of unconditional love that God gives us. God reaches out and He wants to share us, our lives with Him. And doesn't want us to be frightened about to come to God. You know, when we've been really bad, and we went home, and you didn't want your parents to know anything, because you know nowadays you know they'll leather you, and, you know, because you're frightened they would find out about something. But God's not that kind of God. God already knows. God already knows. That's the big thing. God already knows. You can't hide it from Him. So you ought not to be afraid to go and say to God, God, I've messed it up again. The psalmists, as you read through the Psalms, these people were pouring out their heart to God in anger sometimes, and in sheer penitence at other times. But they weren't afraid to talk to God. And that's something we need to really understand and get a hang of. For the love of money is the root of all evil. A lot of people quote that and say, oh, money is the root of all evil. No. You can do a lot of good stuff with money. But it's when money becomes the love of your thing, it focuses everything else, then it becomes the root of all evil. When people do anything in order to get money, that's when it becomes evil. Okay, money's done a tremendous amount of good in people's lives by the opportunities it's given them. So money in itself, there's nothing wrong with money. It's neither good nor bad. It's like a laser. The laser can be used to weld the retina of an eye, or it can be used to blow a hole in a tank. You know, the laser itself is neither good nor evil. It's how it's used. Okay? And some people would say blowing a hole in the tank is doing good. Okay, so anyway, hypocrisy. Falsehood destroys fellowship and friendship. Honesty with humility wins hearts. If you know people who are honest and humble, they're nice people to know usually. And they win your heart, because they're the kind of people you want to be your friends. Okay? Should do. Grace that underlies everything. Understanding that God loves us and loved us when we were ungodly, and how much more in His love and forgiveness deal with our sins now that we are His children. Okay? That's a really something that we need to hammer home to ourselves as well as to other people. God loved us when we were walking away. God loved us when we in ourselves maybe didn't even think about Him or give Him any room in our lives. God loved us enough to allow Christ to die for us. And that's the basis of our salvation. God loved us when we were unlovely. Now that we have a relationship with Him, is He going to love us any less? Of course not. He's going to love us all the more. Okay? Grace. Wonderful grace of Christ. Appreciating God's grace, we work from what we already are. Security in Christ allows us to be authentic, to be genuine, without fear. God knows us. He knows our good and He knows our bad. When you love a woman, or a woman loves a man, more likely when a woman loves a man, she usually loves him warts and all. Okay? When she squeezes the toothpaste there, and when it should be there, you still love her anyway. Okay? It might be frustrating, but you still love her anyway. Okay. Hypocrisy is usually linked ultimately to legalism. Grace gets the focus on God enough what people think. Okay, we need to be willing to do what's right as far as God is concerned. If we can get God right, then other things will fall into place. But that needs to be our focus. Who are we ultimately want to please? Ourselves, our best friend, or do we ultimately want to please God? And if we want to please God, we'll find that our friend will like us as well, and we'll even get to like ourselves eventually as we get past the facade. Okay, I'll stop there. I think as far as we're going to get, it's going to run over time, so we'll stop there.